what exactly is a helping professional? Thomas Schofholt, who wrote a wonderful book called The Resilient Practitioner in 2001, referred to helping professionals as people in high-touch professions. So high-touch professions are really, it's a wider kind of span than what you might think is a traditional definition of a helping professional. A helping professional, you might think of people who work in healthcare, mental health, first responders, fire and ambulance, for example, law enforcement, lawyers, judges, anyone who works in the court system, crown attorneys, and so on, educators, teachers, special ed teachers, school principals, educational assistants, disaster relief workers, volunteers in all of those fields, and a group that many of us don't think about, which are animal care workers. Animal care workers, so veterinarians and vet care assistants, are often impacted, deeply impacted by the work that they do, which makes sense when you think about it. You take the people who love animals the most and you ask them to deal with animals who have been abused or neglected or have to euthanize them. So those are sort of the groups that we think about in terms of high-touch professions, but there's groups that we also forget about, which are clerical and support staff, administrators, secretaries, receptionists who work in these high-touch professions. So a secretary who works in a law office, or a janitor who works in a youth correctional environment. Other groups that we often forget about are court reporters, crime scene photographers. All of these people in various ways are exposed to either traumatic material or stories of people in pain, and what we have found is that all of those have an impact on these individuals. Anyone who works with vulnerable subgroups with high trauma exposure, so that would be anyone who works in the military, especially with soldiers who have been deployed in high trauma environments, prison guards, prison psychologists, obviously nurses who work in a prison environment, but also the cook or the chef in a prison, anyone who works in child protection, police officers who work in investigating child pornography on the internet, people who work in emergency wards, and so on and so forth. So that gives you an idea of what we're referring to as a helping professional. That's a really, really wide cross-section of the population, and most of these folks have not actually been trained to deal with compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma in their work environment. Another group of helpers are caregivers. Caregivers, family caregivers of ailing family members, having a family member with a degenerative illness. Your spouse suffers from Alzheimer's and you're looking after him 7 to 8 years before he passes on, or he gets placed in a home, and you don't sleep for 7 to 8 years because you're constantly having to deal with his agitation or distress. You have a child with a profound disability and you're looking after that child 24/7, or other chronic needs. So all of these folks fall under the umbrella of helpers, and what we have found over time is that they're being deeply affected by the work, and we refer to that as the cost of caring.